I'm going to tell you about the week I broke our apartment complex's recycling policy so thoroughly that management themselves begged us to stop. It started when our new property manager, a man named Doug, who had clearly never learned the phrase, "pick your battles," decided to enforce the recycling rules with the enthusiasm of a tax auditor. Every Tuesday, residents were supposed to bring their recyclables down to the basement bins. Paper goes here, plastic goes there, glass over there. Simple enough. The problem was that Doug had been receiving complaints from the board about the recycling room being too messy, and his solution was to implement a zero-tolerance policy that would make the Geneva Convention wince. The new policy was this: any recycling left in the bin area that wasn't perfectly sorted would result in a $50 fine, and worse, the entire building would lose its recycling privileges for a month. Doug sent out a 6-page memo explaining this. 6 pages. For recycling, he also announced that on Tuesdays, he would personally inspect all bins at exactly 6 p.m., and anything out of place would trigger the penalty. Now, I'm generally a reasonable person. I recycle. I care about the planet. But Doug had been on a power trip since day one, and the whole building had started to dread Tuesday like it was some kind of dystopian fitness test. The man had nothing better to do than stand around waiting to catch someone putting a soda can in the wrong bin. So here's what I did. I read the policy. I read it 3 times actually, because I wanted to be absolutely certain. The rules stated that all recyclables had to be sorted into their respective containers according to material type, with labels clearly visible and facing outward. Now here's where Doug got creative. He started enforcing this to the letter, which meant that if even a corner of a cereal box peeked out of the paper bin, or if a plastic bottle was resting against the glass bin instead of inside it, he'd issue warnings. We were all tired. The building was tired. So on the following Tuesday, my neighbors and I showed up with industrial-sized trash bags and a spreadsheet. We had sorted every single item individually. And I mean individually. A single envelope in the paper bin, 1 soda can, placed at a precise angle in the plastic bin, 1 glass jar, centered perfectly in the glass bin. We spent 45 minutes arranging $17,000 worth of recycling into what can only be described as a minimalist art installation. Doug arrived at 6 p.m. exactly and immediately started hyperventilating. Because here's the thing. When you enforce a rule to the letter, you can't very well complain when someone follows it to the letter. Our installation took up the entire recycling room floor space. There was barely room to walk. And technically, everything was sorted. Everything was in the right bin. Everything was facing the right direction. But now there was no room for anyone else to add their recycling, and Doug had to personally move every single item to verify it was correctly sorted, which took him 2 hours. The next Tuesday we did it again, and the Tuesday after that. By the 4th week the board had received 17 complaints from other residents who couldn't use the recycling room. Doug was called in for a conversation. The zero-tolerance policy was quietly retired, and we were all left with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the best way to beat a power-tripping manager is to become the most compliant residents in the history of apartment living. Doug transferred to a different property 3 months later. Never underestimate the power of people who have nothing but time and a copy of the building rules.